We have a tendency to kind of have this regulator in our head that stops us from pushing too hard. Based on studies, every single rep range increases muscle density. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky, because it's going to come to a point where you're going to be lifting and you're going to get stuck.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to answer one frequently asked question, and is, are you getting the most out of your workout? So I brought a special friend of mine, Calvin Masters. So Calvin, thank you for being here with us.
You're welcome.
So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, when you get started with fitness industry, mostly with your online training?
I'm a personal trainer and an online coach today. I started personal training probably 20 years ago, certified personal training, probably under the radar for about 30 years. I became an online coach almost a decade ago. That we kind of started evolving into that, finding that we can help a lot more people with an all-in-one. It's great to be able to spend the time with people per hour in a week, but you just can't really cover everything that you need to actually get a person from point A to point B successfully. So we created our own area where we could actually encompass everything needed to be able to get the person to that goal.
Okay, so starting with the topic of workout intensity. Now, the first question is, what are the best rep ranges for hypertrophy?
Well, good question. Good question. I actually get this one a lot. Well, the traditional way of thinking is 1 to 5 reps for strength training. Correct. For hypertrophy, about 8 to 12 reps. For endurance, it's about 15 plus reps. But what ends up happening is a lot of people skip the different rep ranges because they get hyper focused on the 8 to 12 rep range, which is great for building muscle. It is great. But it's important to exhaust all the different rep ranges because based on studies, every single rep range increases muscle density. So you can build muscle in each one. What it really comes down to is the intensity that you're putting into these reps when you do these workouts. So you can be in an 8 to 12 rep range and not be progressing because you're not bringing the intensity that you need for that. Another thing is you want to exhaust the different rep ranges because you're hitting different muscle fibers. So if you're in 8 to 12 all the time, then you're not really progressing in strength so much. So it's good to spend a little bit of time in that 1 to 5 range.
Right.
Whether you split it up between your workouts or if you do mesocycles of a strength training and then you do a mesocycle of a hypertrophy, 8 to 12. But in spending that little bit of time in the strength training, you're going to increase strength going into hypertrophy. Now, the other rep range, the endurance one, is one that a lot of people try to avoid. They stay out of this one, especially bodybuilders, because they think, well, it's high rep, it's just endurance. That's for athletes and
right.
Whatever. So,
and doing high reps, you're doing less weight.
Right, you're doing less weight. But the reality is, if you're doing this with the right intensity, you're going to build a lot of muscle, and it's actually better in your joints. So spending time in this phase, rest your joints, but at the same time connects you to the mind and muscle connection better. So you're actually slowing the reps down. You're not lifting the weights, because what can happen if you spend too much time in a heavy rep range is you lose that mind and muscle and you get too focused on pushing heavy weight.
Right. When
you end up using secondary muscles almost more than the primary muscles. So spending a little bit of time in that endurance range of say 15 or more increases blood flow. It actually increases the mind and muscle, so you're actually connecting the muscle, more efficiently. So then you turn back around after resting your joints and ligaments, and then you move back into a strength phase, and then you go back into hypertrophy. But overall, I would probably spend the majority of the time in the 8 to 12 rep range.
Yeah, because with my experience, I don't really look much at studies, but I do by talking, different people at the gym and what I actually do with myself, going every day. And I spend a lot of times doing the 10 to 12 reps, and then I bring it down also to the 5 to 6 for strength. And that's what I've seen the most results. When I tried doing a powerlifting workout, which was 1 to 3 reps, I did not see any gains in muscle whatsoever. I did see a lot of strength gains, but I didn't see a lot of muscle gains. I saw the most was close to the 10 rep range.
And I'll tell you what you're saying there's a lot of merit to that. And this is something that people should understand, is that it's not one size fits all for everybody.
Right.
You're gonna hear things from people, you're gonna see studies, but you have to understand that everybody is a little bit different. We all get results a little bit differently. So doing what Ephraim was doing with kind of toying around to see how things go, for his body is important. What's probably more important is just not to do the same thing over and over again without changing the template and without changing your intensity. So when I reviewed this through studies, there was about 7 studies that compared the different rep ranges for which one brought the most results, basically. Right. And 6 out of 7 of those studies showed the same in all 3 rep ranges, except for one. They were 8-week studies. The one was a 12-week study. And believe it or not, the 12-week study actually showed that the highest rep range actually created more muscle growth. So what's going to really serve you best is to take these different rep ranges, incorporate them into your workouts, and find what works for you with this.
I think it's what you also enjoy going to the gym, because if you don't like what you're doing, then you're not going to be consistent. It's what I see a lot. I mean, I'm sure with your online clients, you might see that often, where especially the ones that are not competing, they're just doing it, for better health and just for overall, well-being. They have to enjoy what they're doing. So I think they gotta find
it is, because
that common ground where
workouts can get boring.
Yeah.
And if they're going to get boring, are you really looking forward to it? Or are you really trying to do what you want? I will say that I have had some friends in the bodybuilding world that have switched over to powerlifting type workouts, where you're sitting a little bit more in that 1 to 3 rep range, for the most part, and with the intention of gaining mass and gaining size in this. And every single one of them that I did try that and didn't spend time in the hypertrophy phase or even the endurance phase, found that did not pay off for them. They did not gain the muscle that they were hoping to gain from it, and they ended up falling short.
Well, because a lot of the strength comes down to ligaments and joints rather than the actual muscle when you're building to that strength level,
This is a key thing that you're bringing up right now, because basically it takes 36 to 48 hours for a muscle to fully recuperate.
Correct.
And this is an area that I think that people should understand also. With that theory that your muscle takes 48 hours to recuperate, you could argue that the most efficient way to build muscle is spending more volume on that muscle through the week, meaning creating more days that you would train that muscle. So with that mindset of 48 hours, is it best to train that muscle every 2 days, and go through the week? Some people write workouts that way, but you need to consider one thing with this. Even if you're working the same muscle 3 days a week, that your muscles are able to recuperate in that 48-hour period, but your joints and your ligaments require 72 hours.
Right.
So what'll end up happening is injury. You're going to lead into overtraining at this point. So I would say probably 3 days in between if you're going to work muscles, and where you're going to get the most bang for your buck and really grow the most is training each muscle twice a week. Now, here's another area where people kind of get a little bit off on this, is they go to increase the volume too much, more than what their body is ready for. And the volume basically means increase in exercises, increase in reps. It's adding to what you're doing. Now, if you make a big jump from that and your body's not ready for it, by splitting the days up, so that can actually set you back and put you into a place of overtraining where you're not getting enough recovery, because the growth comes in the actual recovery. One thing to kind of think about when you're looking, if you're training too hard, is your sleep getting messed up? Are you finding that you're fatigued and you're feeling very tired, but you're not sleeping well at night? That's a biomarker that you're overtraining. You're irritable, libido goes down, you're not increasing strength in the gym, you're finding that you're doing it over and over again, but the strength's not going up. That typically means that you're training too hard, and sometimes you need to pull back a little bit.
That was one of my, actually, that you brought that up a few years ago. That was one of my aha moments, where I was doing too much at the gym, thinking that I was gonna get more results, and I was actually regressing rather than progressing, especially with strength. And I was actually gaining, I felt like I was gaining fat. Rather than muscle, and my workouts were very intense, but I was not recovering right. My joints were very achy, and I thought it was because of sleep, but I was sleeping very good. I was also eating pretty healthy, so I was thinking, man, what could it be? And I was looking into it, and I think my workouts were too much. I was spending too many hours at the gym, too much intensity, thinking that, oh yeah, because I spend way too much time at the gym, way too many sets, I'm gonna get more results.
Right.
That's when sometimes less is more. I brought it back down, and I actually saw a lot of gains.
Yeah, this is one of the things, and one of the reasons you kind of brought up an interesting point, that you said that you actually started gaining body fat, you know, in this. And so you think, well, why does that even make sense? One's not related to the other, but it is, because one thing you want to think about is working out as stress on your body. It's a good stress, but you have to have that to be a manageable stress, meaning that you have to have the proper nutrition to support it, right? So that means get enough carbohydrates to bring the recovery, the protein, all those things are in place. Right. But the thing that you want to think about when you're training too much is that cortisol is spiking in your workouts, you know, and so it's going to spike more and it's going to stay pinned a little bit higher when you're not giving it the recovery that it needs. So it's normal for cortisol to spike in a workout, but when you have your post-workout meal, that cortisol comes down and it goes back to where it needs to go to. But when your body's stressed, when it's doing too much, cortisol has a tendency to stay up, and then when you start losing sleep, your cortisol starts to come up as well, and you start to develop brown cortisol. You start to gain weight in your belly and your midsection. So really, when it comes to body composition in general, stress management is going to be on the top 5 things that's probably most overlooked. And not overtraining is one of those things. And I can tell you, for guys that typically come to me, this is my biggest battle with them, is that when they're coming to me and I give them the prescribed workouts, I do want to meet them kind of where they are, but a lot of times they have been overtraining this whole time. And muscle growth, it comes down to one big thing: recovery. That's when you grow. So that happens in sleep, that happens on recovery days. So what I would recommend to anybody that feels like they're close to this right now is take what would be called a deload week. And also a combination of what I call like a cortisol reset. So this would be 2 ways of going about this. You can take the week completely off from the gym, which is a hard pill to swallow for a lot of gym goers that are gym rats. So I meet them in the middle and I say, hey, go 50%, leave 3-4 reps in the tank in your workouts, reduce your volume per exercise. So if you're doing 4 to 5 sets, reduce it down to 3. Cut it 50% basically. I want you to focus on sleep this week, and I want to bring your calories, at least your TDEE, your total daily energy expenditure, so that you're getting enough recovery to let your body go back into a rested state and feel good again. And if your weight drops, if your body fat drops in this week and you feel better, you know that you were overtraining.
So now we know that overtraining is a big issue, but how do we know if we're training hard enough?
Yeah, great point. Great. This seems to be the big debate nowadays. This is where a lot of like old school coaches and new school coaches are butting heads. And I get it, because there's so much information out there that you're going too hard or you're going too little. It's really freaking confusing for somebody, and it'll make your head spin. So the key things is to kind of know, like we talked about, the symptoms of overtraining, right? So, but on the other side of the coin, going back to studies, they did do a study on a group of men. I can't recall how many there were in this study, but they rated basically their intensity in the gym, and pretty much none of them were going at the intensity that they needed to be going to actually create the stress needed on the muscle to kind of force that recovery needed to make their muscle grow. So, I mean, if you think about it, what has to happen for muscle growth is you actually have to shred the muscle. It's like, it's a pretty brutal concept, if you really know it. Right. But what happens is the muscle shreds apart, the body recovers, and that's what brings the growth. It's an adaptation. So your body's adapting to the heavier load by increasing muscle density and strength, right? So the trick is to give enough to be able to create that. So what ends up happening with a lot of people that over the years, especially when you don't have a workout partner, you don't have somebody spot you, and you're using dumbbells, and everybody has that fear that the dumbbell's gonna hit them on the head in the gym in front of everybody and all this stuff. So we have a tendency to kind of have this regulator in our head that stops us from pushing too hard. Right. And whether we know it or not. So we go through the motions. We have these workouts where we have a tendency to be doing the same training, schedule for years, basically. So not increasing reps, not increasing sets, and not increasing the amount of effort in per rep. Right. So this is very common to happen with people. So some ways to kind of gauge this basically is to basically think, when you look at a set, an exercise, you typically are going to have an average 4 sets, right? So you have the first, second, third, fourth. So the first and second, you kind of want to go into it about 70 to 80%. So you don't want to be going to failure every single set. You want to kind of build, your body's acclimating, you're ramping up, getting your body, your motor neurons are adjusting to the weight you're increasing, right? Your third set should be basically where you can barely get the prescribed rep amount. You can barely get it, but you can get it cleanly. Now the fourth set is really where you kind of want to push. Right. Now, if you push into that set on the fourth set and you actually are able to achieve the amount or the rep given that's prescribed to it, and it's clean, that means you need to go up in weight. Right. So that means that you're strong enough to increase weight at this point. So this comes to a really big thing. that I don't see enough of, and I can tell you this one simple thing can change everything, is keeping a workout log.
Yep.
You know, just keeping a log that you train when you put your exercise down. Even if you only put the weight that you did on the last set, so you know when you go into the next week, if you actually hit that number of reps with that weight, and ideally if you do, then you push that weight up in the next week.
I think that's, like you said, nobody does it enough, and it's a huge advantage if you keep track of your weight, your intensity. So you can even write down how intense it was.
Right.
Because you think, okay, you can remember what you worked out last week, but you don't remember how your workout was 3 months ago. You know, so I think seeing that progression will really help out in the short and long
Yeah,
term.
well, I mean, if not for anything else, it's motivation. It's
Right.
motivation to see that you started from this point, and now you're progressing in strength.
Right.
You know, as a natural lifter, you know, you need to be strong. You
Yeah.
need to become strong. That's a key thing that you got to remember, is that increase in strength is what's going to bring returns in muscle growth.
Right.
Right. So you always want to be pushing and improve and weight, and with good form, of course. So usually what I would tell my clients again is I say always push that last set. Even if you fall a couple reps short, try to
Right.
push that a little bit to kind of see where you are. So now, for progressive overload reasons, one of the main drivers for that, which forces progression, is increasing weight over time. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky, because it's going to come to a point where you're going to be lifting and you're going to get stuck. You're going to plateau.
Right.
And then a month is going to pass and you're doing all the right things, but you just can't seem to go, and you can't get that last set to increase in weight, and it's going to happen. That is a plateau. Now this is when we start to bring in things, other methods to kind of increase intensity without actually having to create more weight.
Right.
Or add more weight to it. That would be drop sets would be one of the things that you would actually add into that. So that would mean when you get to that fourth set, say you hit that number that you can't go any more past that, then you just drop the weight 30%, and then you drop it again 30%, and even one more time. And you just can do 5 to 6 reps in each one, and then when you get to that last drop, just go to failure. Now, what this does is this creates more intensity on that last set without actually having to add weight.
Right.
So that's basically going to failure, but a different method, right? So, and also a good way to test too, and I'll have my clients do this every once in a while. I'll tell them on their last set, your last set, I want to get 8 reps on this one. Now, and then I'll put in a little parentheses next to it, if you get 8 reps, keep going and do an AMRAP. So that's as many reps as possible, basically, in that set. So if you get that past that 8 reps, just keep going until you can stop. And in a lot of cases, I think if you test this every once in a while on your last set, you're probably going to do a good amount of reps more than what you thought you could perform.
Right.
And so if you're getting 12 reps, then that now becomes your starting weight on that. That would get moved to your first set, and then you'd progressively would build up. And whatever weight you increased, you know, you keep that increase going for every single set up there on. So that's one way to kind of test and see and create that extra bit of intensity needed to grow at this point. So another is doing
Cluster sets?
cluster sets. Another method is doing cluster sets. So a cluster set basically is when you get to the last set, you'll do the prescribed amount, and then what you'll do is you'll rest about 15 seconds, and you'll just sit there, then you'll take that weight and you'll do another 5 reps. And then you rest for another 15 seconds. And then you'll do another set. You can do this 2, 3, even 4 times. You can do this 4 in a row till basically you kind of hit failure where you can't actually perform 5 reps with that weight. And what they'll do is that'll increase the intensity as well. These are the things that are going to push over that hump and get you to the next point to be able to increase weight.
Right.
So they're more advanced techniques. And another thing to keep in mind with this, when you see people doing drop sets and doing any type of anything to increase intensity in a workout, a lot of cases they haven't maxed out what they can actually really lift at this point. They haven't been going through the proper phases to keep increasing strength, so it's kind of not really having the same effect at that point. So I would save these methods for when you feel like you're really stuck at a weight and you cannot increase weight going on into the next workout. So those methods will keep you going.
Well, Calvin, thank you for joining me. Hopefully you guys took a lot out of that. Let us know if you guys want more content like this down in the comments below, and we'll see you on the next video.